You are listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson, episode 155. Hey there, you're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast. My name is Angela Henderson, and on this show, we talk about improving your business, life, or both by having amazing and rich conversations with brilliant guests who will inspire you and who will give you tips and tricks to help you grow both in life and in business. Well, hey there, and welcome back, you amazing human, to another awesome episode of the Business and Life Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ange, from Angela Henderson Consulting, where I'm an international award-winning business consultant and coach, keynote speaker, and podcaster who has helped thousands of amazing women business owners get all the pieces in place to have consistent 4- and 5-figure months and then on to 6- and 7+ figure years without burning out in the process. I'm really excited for today's podcast, but I'm equally a little bit nervous for this podcast today. The reasons why I'm so excited is that I get to learn from an amazing human on a topic that, in my opinion, everyone should be talking about and embracing. That topic, inclusion and diversity in business. I'm also, bonus, equally excited that this amazing human, Louise O'Reilly, who's coming on the podcast today, loves the color pink. And if you followed me for long enough, you know my obsession around pink. However, I'm a little bit nervous about this episode because I have so much to learn when it comes to inclusion and diversity, and this topic is out of my comfort zone. But I also am nervous because I want to get this conversation right, because the information that you get from this podcast is going to help you and help others. And then through this podcast, we can start expanding our knowledge around this. So I want to make sure I don't get it wrong. I know I always talk about done is better than perfect. And so often, yes, this is something I say this to the people I coach. I practice this myself. But on this particular conversation, I know I've been hesitant and reluctant about talking about this topic. I know I could have been speaking about this topic earlier. But as I said, I don't personally feel that I've been equipped to speak on this topic because, as I said, I so desperately want to ensure I get it right out of the respect for the Aboriginal Indigenous culture here in Australia. But today's the day, and I am beyond blessed to have come across Louise O'Reilly, who is an inclusion and diversity coach, who is going to be sharing with us today and being able to not only educate myself, but educate you around the topics about inclusion and diversity in our business. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what is the difference between inclusion and diversity. We're also going to talk about how does inclusion and diversity relate specifically to business? Why is inclusion and diversity important to our businesses? I also want to bring up the topic of white privilege. What does this mean, and how is white privilege potentially stopping so many of us from truly having inclusion and diversity in our business? We're going to talk about the importance of acknowledgement of country, and we're also going to share, Louise is going to share 3 ways that each of us can be doing today to improve inclusion and diversity in our businesses. But before we get into this episode, this podcast is sponsored by Australia's leading 4-day, 3-night exclusive women in business retreat that I run every single year. And might I note, there are literally only 5 tickets left for this amazing event. This retreat is where we focus on women have the chance to connect, refocus, and learn and grow both in life and business. I'm hosting this event from November 4th through November 7th at the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. Again, it is an exclusive event with only 5 tickets remaining of the 50. Denise Duffield-Thomas, a good friend of mine, is opening keynote. Cherie from Digital Picnics and so many other top speakers are going to be there every single day, helping you with masterminds, giving you individual help. If you'd like to secure one of the last 5 remaining tickets, head to angelahenderson.com.au and click on retreat. Now get your pens and your paper and your ears open to what is going to be an epic podcast. Welcome to the show, Louise.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How exciting.
I know. I'm super, super excited to have you on the show today to talk about this important and powerful topic about the 3 ways to improve inclusion and diversity in your business. But before we get started, I wanted to see if you'd be willing to do an acknowledgement of country. And after we do the acknowledgement to country, I'd love for you to just help us understand a little bit more of the importance of acknowledgement of country so that others have that wonderful, juicy information.
Absolutely, I certainly can. So I, Louise O'Reilly of the Warawa Noongar people, would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional and ongoing custodians of the lands and waters on which I am on, where I play on, where I work on, and where I raise my beautiful family on. This is a place that we create beautiful memories. And I would like to pay respects to the elders for their leadership, for their support, their guidance, their love, and for their role they play in the community. It is because of these elders and also because of these custodians that we are able to thrive in this place, because they are the ones that care for the land on both the physical space and also on a spiritual space. And they make sure that everything works together properly in beautiful harmony and ecosystem. So for that, I'm so grateful. So that is an acknowledgement of country. It doesn't have to be that long or that specific. It is something that we customary do here in Australia, and it is something that the Aboriginal people have done forever to acknowledge the people who are the rightful custodians of that place. It is their birthright and it is their role to care for those places. So it is just a beautiful, respectful way to acknowledge them and their role in this place. And it is becoming more and more common in Western society of Australia as well to be doing acknowledgement of country whenever there is some kind of formal gathering. So I would always do an acknowledgement of country on a podcast, because I know people come to this place. It is a place of gathering. It's a place of listening. So I will do that always in those spaces. And I would also like to pay my respects to the custodians and the elders of the lands in which you're on as well, because every place around the planet has custodians and some form of elder. Whether they're called that or not is another story, but I wish to pay my respects for them too.
And I just want to touch upon, so acknowledgement of country is utilized for formal gatherings. So speaking events, I'm assuming like I run, as you know, you're part of one of my speakers for Australia's Leading Women in Business Retreat. Obviously there, I would be able to do an acknowledgement of country.
Yes.
You know, there is also the welcome to country, right? Can you explain what is the difference between acknowledgement of country and welcome to country? And are there only certain people who can do one or the other?
Yes, absolutely. There is a big difference between the two. So acknowledgement of country can be done by anyone who wants to show respect to those custodians and those elders of that place. Whereas a welcome to country can only be done by the elders of that particular area.
Okay.
So I can't give a welcome to country, even if I'm on my own country. I'm not. Okay. I can't do that yet. Who knows when I can do that? But welcome is basically, you listen to what it actually says, it's welcome to country. So it's basically saying our homes, when we look about Aboriginal culture, our homes are bigger than our houses and our yards. Our home is actually what we call our country. And I know a lot of people may be quite confused when I talk about Australia and talking about country, because you think, well, Australia is one country. What are you talking about countries? Mm-hmm. But in Aboriginal culture, there are hundreds and hundreds of countries in Australia, and they have their own borders, which are separated by nature, and then there's natural borders. Mm-hmm. And we know where those borders are. It's very similar to, like, you would associate with like Europe. There are different countries. There's one landmass, but there are many countries. It is very same here in Australia, though those countries, Aboriginal countries, aren't widely acknowledged, but they have been there for millennia.
And so how many countries approximately are there within Australian land then?
Oh, my goodness. I couldn't even tell you, hundreds.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I think I've seen a map once, I'm pretty sure, and it was a breakdown of all the countries, and they had different colors and things too on them. I'm pretty sure it was. Yes. And they're literally, I just remember it was left me really amazed at how many individual ones there were. Like I agree, there was hundreds, right, on that particular map. But very interesting. I just want to make sure that, again, those people that are out there that are listening or running events, etc., make sure that they understand the difference between acknowledgement and welcome to country. So if they are going to partake in acknowledgement of country, now, how do they know, or where would they go to be able to do the acknowledgement of country correctly, right? Like, even for me, it's like I'm running my event in November, and I want to make sure that I do it correctly out of respect for you guys. So where would we even start? Is there like a templated, and I know that sounds a bit silly, but is there like a stock standard, sentence structure that we could be utilizing? Or how do we know what country, like I'll be at the Gold Coast, so where would I find what country is it that I want to be able to acknowledge?
There is standard templates that you can use, but I always say don't do them. Don't do it. Don't go to the template. You can come to me, absolutely. I have got an video educational series that I have done on Welcome to Country and Acknowledgement of Country, and they're free to go and watch. So there's certainly that resource that you can do. I also have a masterclass on it and on specifically for businesses to write meaningful and impactful acknowledgements of country. Now, I will say I advise not to do the templated ones because it is such a show of respect. Mm-hmm. And if you're writing an acknowledgement and your energy and intention is not something that's specific to you and coming from you and your heart, I question whether it's worth doing.
So we'd get into the term tokenism, would we not?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a custom. It's a beautiful custom that we can do, but let's not make it a tick in the box.
Yeah.
Let's not just say, well, we got to do an acknowledgement of country. Okay, tick. Let's actually understand really what it means to do it and what you're saying, mm-hmm. and understand how it actually is linked to you, because acknowledgement of country and custodians are linked to every single person on any land, because it is also their role to keep all the people on that land safe and thriving. Mm-hmm. So behind closed doors, behind the scenes, Aboriginal people and a lot of First Nations people are doing things to make sure every person on the planet is safe, especially spiritually safe, but also thriving in those areas too. Mm-hmm. Now, what you can do if you want to find out what countries you're on, you can go to that map. Let me think the acronym. AITAS, AITAS, and then go map, Aboriginal map, mm-hmm. and then I believe they have the map on that particular site. But also you can go and look at your local Land and Sea Council, mm-hmm. and contact them, and you can ask them those questions. A lot of time they will have the information on their website already. But also if you're interested in getting an elder in to do a welcome to country at your event, especially it's really good if you have people travelling from other places who don't normally live in that area, travelling to that place. It is spiritually quite important for them to get a welcome to country, because it's almost like just imagine the country is like your house and you're inviting people in to a house that's not yours. The owner is there going, you can absolutely do this event here. Please welcome, come into this event. But if you're not allowing that owner of the house to welcome those people in, you're not sure whether they can be safe. And it's also just really respectful to say, look, we understand this is the place that you're taking care of. Mm-hmm. So please, would you do us the honour of welcoming all these people who are visiting this place for a while to come in? And it's just a wonderful show of respect.
Gosh, thank you so much. I mean, already so much goodness. And I think we're less than 5 minutes, right, of recording. So thank you for that. And I already feel some really great homework that I'll be getting from you, because I'm going to be working with you one-on-one later on in the year. So I can already feel some creativity that I'll be able to sink my teeth into to make sure that when I do my acknowledgement of country at my event, that again, I've taken some time to consider and also reflect. So I can already feel the homework from you coming on in a good way, in a happy way, right? So
yes, absolutely.
So thank you for the acknowledgement of country. And then one of the things that I like to do whenever I bring a guest onto the podcast is I like to ask them a fun question also, so the audience gets to know you a little bit more and your personality and what you get to do. And my fun question for you is, you have the coolest pink hair. Like, I have envy whenever I see you on social media, and I saw you today and my heart starts going pitter patter, right? Because I'm so excited, because pink is my favorite color. So I just need to know, is pink your favorite color? And if so, what is your favorite shade of pink? And if pink isn't your favorite color, what is your favorite color?
Oh my goodness, that is such a loaded question. It's like you're making me choose favorites between babies or something. Yes, absolutely. Pink is my favorite color. It has been my favorite color since forever. And I dyed my hair pink because, I think I saw a doll or a Barbie or something like that, and she had the most beautiful pink hair. And I thought, one day I would love to have pink hair. And I kind of didn't. I've only had pink hair for maybe the last 2 years. And I just thought, you know what? I'm an adult and I can have pink hair. I can choose that for myself. And it's a wonderful show of my, what's on the inside. I find it reflects out. My shade of pink. Oh, that's interesting. I really like the really hot pinks, but not the ones that are like the light pink brightened up. I'm talking about the pinks that almost have like a purpley kind of tinge to it.
Yep.
So
no, you're breathing my language, speaking my language, my friend. I was like, I'm looking at my pink water bottle, my pink phone. I'm in a pink T-shirt. Like, I love it, right? And there's like a vibrant pink that's like electric almost, and that's how I perceive your hair. Do you know what I mean? It's just like you're like, oh my goodness. And like you said, that energy, it is very much an attraction. I was like, okay, she's pink, and we're basically best friends now. But
yeah, pretty much.
But also that the fact that is you can feel it, right? It's like it's fun, and then your warmth. I mean, for those obviously they can't see you, but there's an essence of warmth from you. So thank you for that. Now, business-wise, can you let the audience know a little bit, where did you start and what are you up to now in business? And then we'll sink our teeth into the inclusion and diversity topic.
Oh, this is always such an interesting question because, you kind of talk about yourself differently depending on the energy that you're feeling at the time. So for me, this started as far back as I can possibly remember, because there's lots of things that have happened throughout my lifetime that has contributed to me deciding to go along this particular path and express myself in this particular way and support people in this particular way. So I am an inclusion and diversity coach, mentor, course creator, all the things. And it actually springs from pain. So I'm so sure a lot of your listeners, if they're entrepreneurs, can also resonate with this. You felt some kind of level of pain and you found a way through it in some way. And then you realized I can help other people in that same situation. And I'm kind of doing that, but there's a little bit of a twist to it. So I at a very early age was confronted with this concept of identity because I am fair-skinned, but I identify as Aboriginal. And I found in a lot of the communities I was in, and usually it's the older people in those communities, and it was particularly in my school community, would say you can't be Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal at the same time. How do you identify? And there's lots of questioning. So at a 5 or 6 year old, I was already asking myself, who am I? What is my identity? Which is very, very early for kids to be asking those kinds of questions, but a lot of marginalised kids do that when they don't look like the rest of society or their culture isn't aligned to that same culture. So those things kind of contributed to me asking lots of questions and really observing. And what I found was with the way people speak about my Aboriginal community and their body language, and just seeing that there was no presence of my culture anywhere, I really started to understand that Aboriginal people just weren't wanted in these spaces at all. And, then I started to feel, I'm bad, I'm wrong. I started questioning, like, am I meant to be here? Where do I belong? I mean, this is meant to be my country and I don't feel like I even belong in my own country. So where do I belong? Where do I fit in all of this? And what the biggest thing actually that stood out to me was the fact that I was invisible in those spaces as an Aboriginal person. And yet you have days like NAIDOC Day or NAIDOC Week or Reconciliation Week, Harmony Day, all those kinds of things. But then on those days, the culture is celebrated and talked about. So what I concluded in my child mind was, okay, I'm completely invisible, but I'm not really. So I'm here. You're actually just ignoring me. You're actually just excluding me and only bringing me out and celebrating in those certain times because it's the feel-good thing to do, right? So I went through a lot of struggle and a lot of pain and a lot of tears over my identity, and there was a certain point that I tried to deny my Aboriginality because a lot of people said to me over and over, why would you say you're Aboriginal when you can get away with not? And that in itself is so unbelievably offensive. But again, in my teen mind, I was like, you know what? It would be easier. It would be easier if I could just deny it and just push it away from me. And I tried to do that. But at the end of the day, that was so unbelievably soul crushing to me. I felt like there was nothing inside of me. I was just an empty shell. And, you know, I contemplated my whole existence. Why am I even here? So what I realized was it was actually harder for me to deny my own identity than it was for me to face the racism and the microaggressions that I received daily from, you know, the community, but also within my own family. So that was all good. I kind of got through it. And then something amazing and beautiful happened. I fell pregnant with my first baby. And then I thought to myself, my goodness, is my baby going to have to go through that same pain of their identity and trying to fit into a world that evidently does not want them there? And so I went, I've got to do something about it. And I've got 2 babies now, and I made that decision to try and change the world in any possible way that I can so they don't have to go through that same pain, so they don't have to feel that discrimination. They don't ever have to question their own identity and question whether they're good enough, whether they're worthy, or, you know, whether they deserve to be thriving or have fun or express themselves. So that's kind of why I'm here.
I mean, very powerful. I mean, the fact that at the age of 6, you had to question where you belong, that's, you know, something, again, and this is why these conversations are so important. I think this is where white privilege comes in, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But like, we don't hear these stories, right? Or maybe we do and people don't choose to listen to them. But 6, I mean, in fact, for a 6-year-old, I mean, you should be off playing, right? Just cruising along with the pink Barbie doll or pink bike or pink whatever, right? But you're having to sit there and having conversations with yourself that from a cognitive perspective, from a child brain development perspective, is probably so overpowering in many ways because you don't have those skill sets yet, right, to really process everything. So I can only imagine the essence of loneliness that also would have, and you may not even been able to use those, even say like, I feel lonely, because not all 6-year-olds can articulate that either, right? But you know, in that there's like something like almost like an emptiness almost, right? So that's why, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, because even just that in itself has given me a whole nother outlook. And one of the things you talked about that I'm curious to know a little bit more about is you use the word microaggression, and I've never heard that word as phrased. I mean, obviously I hear about aggression, but I've never heard about microaggression. Can you give me a few examples about what microaggression could look like towards your culture on any given day?
Yep, sure. So microaggressions are these things that quite often everyday society doesn't realize is actually quite racist and offensive. And it's based in unconscious bias and beliefs. And it can be, although it's so small, what's really interesting with it is that when you have microaggressions that are happening to you every single day, multiple times of the day, it builds up. It builds 100%. Up, and it really, it builds up, and it affects your mental health. And the thing with these little microaggressions is you actually can't escape it when you are part of a marginalised group, especially like Aboriginal people are here in Australia, where, you know, you can go into public and people are talking to you and these microaggressions are happening. And then you look at advertisements or anything to do with Aboriginal people and there's the microaggressions. And then you look at the news media and there's the microaggressions. It's on radio, it's in your living rooms, on your TVs, it's on your social media. So it's like you cannot escape from the racism unless you sit in a room on your own. So it is a daily, almost hourly thing that Aboriginal people have to deal with. And I say deal with in a, you know, it's not a great thing, because you shouldn't have to deal with stuff like that. But what it is basically, okay, I'll give you a few examples. So you might walk up to an Aboriginal woman and say, how many children do you have? And there is an immediate assumption that they have children. Whereas if you walk up to a person, how on earth do you know children until you actually have a conversation with them? So immediately asking how many children do you have is interesting. Another thing could be asking, so do you work? Is another microaggression. It's not necessarily a question. You would walk up to someone who looks like you and ask them that particular question. One very popular one, which is in microaggression that happens to African-American people, is people want to touch their hair. That's a microaggression to ask to touch people's hair. It's something like, does your skin burn from the sun, is another microaggression. It's like, of course it burns, it's skin.
Yeah. Like, hello, we're still, do you know what I mean? It's still skin people, yes.
There's so many of these seemingly innocent conversation starters, which when you are marginalised, you can read between the lines and understand there is a prejudice or an unconscious bias or belief about that particular person. And it's very present in almost the first words that are spoken from a stranger to a stranger. So it's very interesting. That's what I guess I'm just
sitting here going because I'm reflecting on myself. I'm like, have I ever, these microaggressions, what have I potentially done to contribute? And I'm like, but I wouldn't, I mean, never, of the examples you use, I'm like, I can never imagine just going up to someone, not asking them their name and just being like, how many children do you have? Like, what, I'd be like, what is going through people's minds, right? Like, I just like, hello, my name is, right? Like, how are you? How's your day been? Have you been in Brisbane long? What are your plans for the weekend? But like you said, though, it's happening daily. And it was something I was going to ask you, because there's a book that I talk often about, James Clear, amazing book called Atomic Habits. And he talks about the 1% rule, but kind of from a different angle. But if you take 1% action every single day on particular things, obviously it's going to accumulate over time and have a positive impact for the growth of your business. But in your essence, it's actually the opposite, is what you're saying, is these microaggressions are compacting and accumulating for Indigenous people of Australia, right? Or anywhere in the world, right? And what's happening is it's actually then impacting mental health. I'm assuming then that also could lead to other things, not just mental health, but people might be like, I've had enough of this. Suicide. Again, and correct me, I don't want to assume here, but I'm just based on what you're saying. And I'm an ex-mental health clinician where I used to, diagnose anyone with depression, anxiety, etc. So I get it. So it's like, to then have those micro aggressions compact, it's interesting because as an ex-mental health clinician, I would have potentially looked at an Indigenous person coming in a way of understanding what they have to go through on any given day because of these microaggressions. Does that make sense? So it's like understanding that it's there and how it compacts, but in a negative compact is, yes, I think people need to be very mindful of that.
Yeah, and then it almost, then when there are things like protests or certain topics come up in terms of Aboriginal rights or Aboriginal needs, a lot of the community are often like, whoa, where did this come from? Why are you only talking about this now? And not understanding that these things have been protested for as long as colonisation has existed here in Australia, but it's just we're being heard a little bit more. But also sometimes it gets to a point where you just I cannot take this anymore, and you explode. And then it's like, whoa, you're just an angry, Black person, which is often used, which is don't use that, don't do that. And then it's painted with a whole nother trait. And it's like, well, if you are constantly being told you're not worthy, you're not okay, you're not smart, you don't deserve good jobs, you don't deserve good money, you don't deserve good homes, you don't deserve anything, you get to a point where you're like, enough's enough.
Yeah,
I'm angry. I don't like this. Something, please listen to me. Something needs to change. And in Australia, it's very hard to get any kind of change for Aboriginal rights, which essentially are human rights. Aboriginal people are not asking for anything that a normal human wouldn't want. But because we only take up around 3% of the population, yet 97% of the people get to vote on things that specifically impact Aboriginal communities, yet not understanding the culture or the actual impacts they're going to have, it's very hard to get anything changed and to have things that don't impact us. And it's really strange because until you understand the culture, you can't understand how it's impacting. And there is no kind of awareness or education rollout to allow the understanding of culture unless you get consultants in or you pay for that kind of thing. So
whereas in my opinion, it should just like be part of the overall, like I just go like, why would you, like these people should be part of teams getting paid good money to come in and be able to educate accordingly, because that's where change would start from, right? Especially in our schools and the younger kids, because as you know, it's very hard to change adults. People are set in their ways. People just have opinions that whatever, right? Unless they're willing to change and willing to hear. But again, to me, it's like all schools should be bringing in multiple people, not like I'm talking like teams of people, to be able to start having some root change so that these kids are being informed and guided accordingly about Aboriginal culture and like all these things. Like if, this will be a conversation with my children at the dinner table tonight, is around this microaggression, right? These are conversations that they shouldn't have to wait till they're 42 to hear, right? Yeah. So like I said, I'm mindful of your time, but like everything we're talking about aren't questions I had actually prepared for. They're just rolling off, which is great. But I'm mindful of your time because I'm like, oh my goodness. This podcast go for 84 hours, right? And so I'm mindful. So thank you again for allowing those conversations just to happen, because all of this there's no one thing that's more important than the other. It's again, an accumulation, and it's all important. So thank you. Now, inclusion and diversity, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are frequently mistaken for the same, but they're not same, no. How I've perceived it. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more so that we're all on the same page, what the difference between inclusion and diversity is.
Absolutely. So I say that I'm an inclusion and diversity coach and mentor in that particular order for a very important reason. Here in Australia and a lot of places around the world, they have diversity and inclusion, and there is a genuine form of inclusion, and there is a genuine form of diversity, and there is a forced version of diversity.
Okay.
So inclusion comes first, and this applies in business as well. What we need to do is start really understanding the spaces that we're holding and how we're showing up. And inclusion means you are holding some kind of space which is mindful of people who identify differently to you, who have different cultures, who have different religions, who have different genders, and being very mindful of that. And in your creation of your particular space, you make it more accessible for them to come into that space. It's also safe for them to come into that space, so they're not being judged, and they won't have to go through certain obstacles or challenges to get the same opportunities that the most privileged people in our society get. So essentially, it's about being really mindful of how can I facilitate this space or this business or host this business in a way that makes it more available and equal for people who are marginalised to be in this space too. So it's about creating that safe, inclusive space. And then what happens is, because you have created a space which is ready for marginalised people or people who identify differently to you to come into it, it's easy for them to come through. It's not like this is a difficult process, and there are options for them to come in and access your business. They will naturally come, because you don't have to stand there going, hey, I'm a business and I'm inclusive, because often businesses that do that really aren't inclusive. If you have to yell it out, it's in the actions you take. It's in the processes you take. It's in the way you show up. And marginalised people can see it. You don't need to tell them that you're inclusive. They can see it, because they can see it's easier for them to find you. It's easier for them to work with you, and it's easier for them to access you, physically or whatever it is. And that's where you get that genuine diversity coming into those spaces. It's when they're naturally choosing to come and be in your space too. A lot of the time we have almost like these quotas in businesses and companies that, say, we want to have diversity. So make sure there is this percentage of representation of women and this percentage of Aboriginal people and this percentage of, disability or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then they go and seek out to find people to fit in that space. Mm-hmm. And they will pull them into those spaces. Yet that space is not safe for them to be in because they are not really seen, they are not heard, they are not valued. So they can be sitting there at the table with you, but their opinions, their ideas, and their presence doesn't actually make a difference and isn't contributing to the outcomes of the visions, of the ideas, of the processes. It's just being there to be there. And that's what I call forced diversity.
Which makes complete sense, right? Is there, I think you used the word quota, is that there's a quota that businesses have to quote unquote have, right, in order to again tick a box that they have an inclusive and diverse working area or corporate area or whatever it is. But like you said, is the difference is that the majority of those individuals that then are in those positions, it's not safe for them, and that they still don't really have an opinion or are able to verbalize or give different viewpoints.
And a lot of the time it's because businesses are trying to find culture fits and not value fits. And this is why it's very important to distinguish between those two, because when you're looking for people to fit a culture fit, it basically means we're looking for people who are the same as us, who think the same, who feel the same, who have the same customs and all the sameness. And so trying to get people who are then identified differently or belong to different community groups come into that space, it is very overwhelming. It is intimidating, and lots of those microaggressions happen, lots of racism, lots of discrimination happens in those spaces. And you don't want to be setting up your business to have those kind of energies happening. Whereas if you look at value-based, so we're looking at value fits. So then what you're doing is saying, okay, these are my 3 priority values in my business. So mine might be like inclusion and leadership and, I don't know, love or something like that. If those are your values, then you can start looking for people who it's their priority values too. And when you invite those people in, it doesn't matter how you identify because you all believe in the same value. You have the same vision. And that's where you can all then contribute to a beautiful vision of what you want to be creating in the world. It creates community. You are connected on a different level. You then create your own community based around those values. So, and it creates all kinds of things like staff loyalty. So there's not much turnover. You create community in your own business.
And that's what I was going to talk about, because I've heard other people talk, well, what are the benefits of having an inclusive and a diverse community? But what I want to talk about is that there's benefits, but it's not just going to benefit the business, correct? It's going to benefit the ripple effect to community, to overall country, to global change, would it not too? Like for me, when I was looking at questions to bring to the podcast, I was like, well, hold on a minute. It can't just mean that the business benefits. Surely there's like a knock-on effect, because it would mean that those people who are getting hired, say the CEO of a company, right? More than likely their family is also coming from a place of values, inclusivity, correct? And then that means that I just feel it's a knock-on effect. Is that me, or am I missing the picture that it's not just the business that benefits, but it's a bigger picture?
It is a massively bigger picture. It is beneficial in almost every way you can possibly think of it. Yes, it increases your bottom line at the end of the day. I'll be really clear. There is a reason why inclusion and diversity is massive business in big business, because there is money in it. Because what you start to do is you start opening up your business to actually include the entirety of your niche. Now, I say, inclusion, and people go, how can I include everyone? How can I do business like that? And that's not at all what I'm saying. It's very important that we help the people that we're here to help. And that doesn't mean everyone. But what I mean is when we create, okay, this is our avatar, this is our niche, what we often do is we include the most privileged people and we set up our businesses in a way that speak to those people. Mm-hmm. But unknowingly and unconsciously, there are people who are quite marginalized who don't fit into that process or system that you have created, which is often the standard way of doing business. Mm-hmm. They don't fit into that. So you are missing out on your soulmate clients who belong in marginalized groups. Mm-hmm. And what it also does is if people don't like it, so there's people who go, oh, I don't really think we should be changing things for minorities or marginalized groups. You start weeding those people from your business. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I don't want them. I don't want to work with them.
I'm like, bye-bye, Felicia. Yeah. I'm out, Jimmy. And I'm like, seriously? Like, no way. It's just because I would also expect, again, those individuals that are doing that are going to bring down the overall morale for everyone, right? It's like, again, a knock-on effect, but in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So then what you do is what I call transitioning from a two-dimensional business to a three-dimensional business. Mm-hmm. So we could get away with being a two-dimensional business before, which was this is who I am and this is what I sell. And, things would sell and it'd be all hunky-dory. Mm-hmm. But we are now becoming more and more conscious consumers. Mm-hmm. We want to know where we're spending our money is going to places that are ethical or places that align with the vision or creation of whatever world we want to be creating. Mm-hmm. And so people are willing to spend more money with those businesses who have a vision of how they're actually impacting the world in a different way, or where they source stuff, or how they're doing business and how inclusive they're being. And so, again, you get more loyalty in your customers. You have more loyalty with your staff. You create community with your staff. You create community with your customers. You have so many more advocates because it's more than just the money. It's more than just the product or service. It's about what are we actually creating together? So you create this beautiful vision of what you're all working towards. And this helps, mentally, physically, every other way you could possibly think of it. Inclusion and diversity is just such a beautiful thing. And also what you'll find is that your body loves it. Mm-hmm. When you really feel that you are making a difference, you are being inclusive, your body will tell you, I love doing this. And I know this conversation is really quite in the early stages. Mm-hmm. We never before in, the history of humanity have we been at a point where we were talking about being more inclusive. It's always historically, the conversation has been about how can we profit? How can we do things? How can we make other people do stuff for us and basically use and abuse them to get and profit and thrive. Mm-hmm. We don't need to do that because we now understand we are in an abundant world and we can all thrive. And when we all thrive, we actually all do better. Mm-hmm. But also, when you are looking at diversity in business, I don't know if you've ever really looked at some big businesses and gone, whoa, they're just so amazing. They're so innovative. How are they doing all the stuff they're doing? They're doing stuff so different and they're just amazing. Mm. Often you'll find it's because they have so much diversity in their companies and they value all the input from all the different backgrounds, all the different ideas. Because when you have diversity, you not only just bring you and your experiences, you also bring all of your knowledge of your culture and the way of doing things and the way life is to the table. Mm-hmm. So there is so much more space for coming up with ideas that have never even been dreamt up before. Mm-hmm. And that is just where the magic happens. It's not about, I often joke a little bit about, when you have a business and everyone is the same and identifies the same, and you sit at a conference going, let's come up with ideas, and go, oh, I came up with this idea, and the other person goes, you're so clever, I came up with that idea too. So you're just bouncing the same stuff around. Mm-hmm. We have to understand that with the cultures we have and our upbringing and our heritage, we are living in a limited capacity of what our mind understands the world to be. Mm-hmm. And we have a limited understanding of different ideas and the way things work. But when you're adding diversity, it it is absolutely magnified, and you have access to so much more. So it's so rich and so beautiful.
No, I mean, really great insight to that, especially around just who wants to be sitting around at your business event or business table and everyone's just agreeing like, it's like, no, like, let's spice things up a little bit here. Like, it's okay to have a different opinion or a different outlook. And like you said, the richness that anyone brings, right? Regardless of their culture, is that they all have different stories. They all have different experiences. And those experiences is what can really create magic within a business, corporation, workplace, because it's not same. Like, there's nothing, I mean, that's so boring, right? Yeah. So now when we look at, I guess, same, let's talk about the white privilege, right? Yes. And again, this could be a whole nother podcast episode. I get that. But I do think it's important because how much of white privilege, first of all, I want to talk about what does it mean, but how is white privilege potentially stopping so many of us, right, from truly having inclusion and diversity in our businesses and life collectively?
Yeah, that is such a great question. So basically what white privilege is, it is a privilege you are born with based on the color of your skin. So essentially, people with white skin are the most privileged people on the planet as it stands today. And with having white skin, it allows a lot more opportunity. It grants a lot more access, and there is a lot. It's basically this idolized human, right? White people are an idolized, ideal human. And we only have to look at like images of Jesus, or if they create images of God and things like that, to know that it's based on a white male. And so what this does is, in lots of different situations, there is a greater chance, just because of the color of the skin, that that person will be the victor in those particular spaces. So they're more likely to get the job. They're more likely to receive awards. They're more likely to be asked to speak. They're more likely, when they do speak, others will stop and listen. Even if someone who has a different color skin says the same idea, it will not be received in the same way, because there is this putting on a pedestal type effect, where it's, well, that person has more power and is obviously we need to listen to them. And that's basically what it does. Now, what white privilege does, now I know your viewers can't see me, but I have white skin. So I too, even though I identify as Aboriginal, I also benefit from white privilege. But what can happen is, when you don't have that understanding of marginalisation and being oppressed systematically on a daily basis, you aren't presented with what white privilege actually means to you. So you can become blind to it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being blind to it. But when you are then presented with this concept that you do have white privilege, it's a really good idea just to have a look around and go, okay, well, how is this happening in my life? How am I actually benefiting from the color of my skin? And I do really want to say this. This is so new. This really, really is. And I don't want anyone to ever feel guilt or shame, because the work that I do is not based in that guilt or shame space, or anger or feelings of injustice. What I want your viewers to know is, now we have some more information, now we have some more knowledge. Let's grab that and go, okay, what is the vision for what I want in my world? So my vision is, I want a more inclusive world where people feel free and safe to be themselves regardless of how they identify. And that's the world I want to create. So when you know what you want to be creating and the type of world you want, then you can start taking steps to do that. So if you are wanting to join my team and go, yes, I want inclusion and I don't want people to feel discriminated against or be unsafe because of the way I identify, then you can start looking at these different things. And it opens up, we have this paradigm of what we believe the world to be. So it's really good to understand that everyone doesn't experience the world and life in the same way. So when you can understand that, and then you can go and seek out the voices of marginalized people and their stories, you can really sit with them, you can listen to them, and then you can have compassion for what they are experiencing, and then look at your own life and the way you're doing business and go, okay, how can I alleviate that particular challenge? What can I do? How can I actually use the privilege that I have to change this in some way? How can I bring awareness to it? What can I change? And that's where that whole thing comes into it. But it's until you are aware that there is more than what you're experiencing, people just do the day-to-day business.
And I mean, that for me was really important, how you said that, again, we're born with the privilege, right? Yeah. And how I really also like how you shone the light on, again, just all those things that, again, are really subtle to me, but like you guys probably not subtle to you, like, again, picture of God, white male, right? Picture of this white person, right? And how it's like, even like when people go speaking, it's like the white people are more likely to be listening. Like all of those things contribute again to this essence of white privilege.
Yeah.
But do you also think, I mean, how much of the white privilege though is impacting people positively or negatively from, again, doing something about it within their communities? Like for me, it's like, yes, I'm born with, white skin. I've got, white privilege by definition. And I know for me, it's always about like, explore, like, how can I do this right? Like, I know I need to do something, but how do I do it right without doing something wrong? And, an example that I'll give is I run obviously the Women in Business Retreat, and we release 10 scholarships every event. And we're about to start releasing those shortly, where we give partial scholarships to 10 different individuals. And this is for women in business who ultimately, my whole vision and mission of my business is to make sure that women have access to tools, community, and resources to grow their business, right? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about, well, how can I also incorporate the Indigenous community to ensure that they're able to have access? Because whenever we put these out every year, it's people of white skin, right, who are applying. Yeah. However, I was on Instagram, and there's a big push more from what I'm finding the American community are going, if you're white, you shouldn't be able to put out scholarships for people of minority backgrounds or marginalized backgrounds. And I'm like, okay. And is it because we're not doing it correctly? Or is it, again, that tokenistic type of thing? Is it part of like white privilege? Like, what is it? Because I genuinely want to make a difference to women, any woman being able to access these tools, community, and resources. But what happened with Black Lives Matter, and for me to start really checking my own self, was I started to look around my community. And yes, my online business manager is Indigenous from New Zealand. I work with people from India, China, a variety of different backgrounds, right? But my majority of people that I was hanging out with are white, right? Yeah. And so for me, I was like, well, hold on a minute. How can I start to expand, right? And start to learn more of other people, because I want to, not because of a tick box. And I was having this conversation with a client of mine, Edka. We were actually, and she said, actually, Angie, you should talk about this on your podcast one day. I'm happy to come on. And she is from India. And she says that, and I know we're kind of jumping a little bit, and I'll come over, but she is from India, and she says her skin is obviously brown. But she said, Angie, it really shits me when people call me that I'm a person of color. Mm-hmm. She's like, why can I not just be a person? Mm-hmm. And so, and we were talking about that, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about that. But in regards to like the scholarship side of thing, like I genuinely want to be able to help any woman. And if I can help the Indigenous community, yes, but I don't want them to feel like I'm doing it as a tick box, right? But also that I'm being told from what I'm seeing over in America, again, I know we're different countries, going, actually, you shouldn't be doing this because it's not your space to be doing this. But I'm like, okay, but then how can I incorporate this, like for me, Indigenous culture, into people being able to at least know that these scholarships are available if they choose to, right? And looking at the bigger picture. Does that make sense?
Yes. Now, you can't see me, but I have just scribbled a whole bunch of stuff down on my notepad to circle back and address a lot of these particular topics. So let's first start with the scholarships. Mm-hmm. So I am in agreement. I don't think scholarships should be offered by white people for people of colour or Aboriginal people, because it's not based on their ethnicity. to go to that particular event and why they can't attend that particular event. A lot of the time it's because they can't afford to go to the event. So it's not an issue of ethnicity. It is an issue of finances. And yes, the underprivileged can be impacted, their finances are impacted by their ethnicity, the colour of their skin. That certainly is a flow-on effect from that. But with scholarships in particular, if you focus on if you are not able to afford this, please apply for a scholarship and you will be considered, then you can go through that particular process. And now what I would be saying, and I say this in the most absolutely loving, gentle way I possibly can, is that if you are putting scholarships out and only white people are applying, it is because your space isn't inclusive yet.
And fair enough, like I said, it's one of the things that I've been looking at over the year going, well, hold on a second, why is it that this cohort of people are applying? Because I never had apply if you're Indigenous. There's nothing like that. It's basically like if you're a woman in business and you're not in a financial space where you could be able to afford an event like this, please apply, because I want to be able to ensure that women have access to the tools, community, and resources. So it wasn't, specifically for one, it was just for women who might not be able to afford it. But then I was like, and that's when my team and I looked last year, we haven't even released them for this year. We're going, well, hold on, what are we doing wrong in regards to our space, right? Like, yes, my team, right? I do feel like I'm at a very good start of inclusivity and diversity, right? But why is my broader community not, And it's something that, again, I've reflected a lot. And obviously, that's why I'm paying to work with you in the upcoming months, one-to-one, because I do want any woman to be able to access this particular event and not just a tick box.
Yep. So I would support you in doing it the same way you have been doing. And what you will notice is after you start working a little bit with me and we start tweaking some of the things in your business, you will notice that there will be a diversity of people coming through bit by bit. And, it may be a little bit slow to begin with, because could you imagine going into a space where it is dominated with people who identify in the same way and belong to the same culture, and then you're one single person who enters that big, massive room? It's very intimidating. And it's the same in online spaces as well. It's not removed from that. So often they will enter and then they'll lurk for a little while, like, oh, is this even safe for me to be seen? Is it safe for me to talk? So it takes time. And, be mindful. It's taken a long time to get to this point where there is that feeling of a lot of unworthiness in the community, but there's also that feeling of those biases that happen, that those marginalised people aren't deserving enough. They're not good enough. They're not up to this particular standard of person in however they identify. So it's taken a little while to get there. So you're not going to have like one conversation and then everything's going to change, or you're not going to have change one process and then it's all going to happen. This is about relationship building and trust building, and it takes time to do that, because you're not going to say, oh, look, I've realized I'm not as inclusive and I've changed this particular thing, and then everyone goes, oh my gosh, we love you, yes, we want to come.
But I mean, that goes back to that tokenistic stuff though, does it not? Where like I wouldn't be going and announcing anything, because I don't feel like there's a need to be like, oh, hey, we're now did it. Like, for example, like I said, my online business, I mean, obviously we're talking about it, but like I don't go around going, my online business manager is Indigenous, right? Like it's Nahuya, right? Like she's just Nahuya, right? That brings this wealth of knowledge and culture from New Zealand, and do you know what I mean? And she tells us, like, so I don't go and scream at, my graphic designers from India, right? She's just Selma. She isn't Selma from India. She's just Selma, right? So even those things that you're talking about is, I don't think I'm not like, it would just be that I bring it in, right? Like, it's not like, oh, my scholarships are now better because of this. It's still available to these people, right? So, listen, I'm mindful, like I said, I could talk to you for hours, and I know you've got another live you have to do, and you've got cross country. And so I'm mindful of this, and I will be picking your brain when, again, I'm working with you later on. So I will kind of, try and go, okay, what can we do to really focus in on this last bit. And my thing is that was obviously we have a juicy conversation and it's just the beginning for some, but for those businesses out there like, oh, fuck, this is like, I need to step up here and I need to check my white privilege and I need to be looking at how I can start to be more inclusive and diverse within my own business. What are 3 things that businesses can start doing right now because they want to do it, not because they have to do it?
Okay, 3 things. All right. Before I do get on that, I do want to introduce another concept to you, which I think is really important. And it's called code switching.
Code switching?
Yes, code switching. And it is something that marginalized people can do where we essentially have 2 identities, where when we are with our families and in our own culture, we are a certain identity, but when we are in a space where it's dominated by the dominant culture, we can code switch into behaving in a way that aligns with that culture.
Okay.
And so a lot of the time you might have the diversity of people in your spaces, but we're very good at code switching, so we can change the way we use our language. We can change the way we use our body language. We can change our whole demeanour based on culture because they are quite different. And so this is part of the resilience of marginalised people, is that amazing ability to code switch and have completely separate identities and know when to change them depending on what social situation we're in. So I just wanted to bring that.
No, super important, right? Because, I mean, again, and I'll want to unpack this a bit more when we work together because I want to make sure that, you know, my own team members don't feel the need to have to code switch, right? When they're on a meeting with us, for example, or et cetera. And, you know, what can I do to know if they are code switching and what can I do to not allow that to happen too, right? So like I said, we could have a separate podcast about code switching. We could have a separate podcast about probably 800 different topics, right? Which again are also, I think I know. Remember the other day you said something about can I do this? And I was like, well, can't you take your blog posts and turn them into podcasts or something? Like I really, if I'm pushing you here, but you know, I would be saying, even though I'm not your coach, I'd be saying like, this is a podcast waiting to happen, right? It's there's so many conversations now. So code switching, again, thank you for addressing that because it's important that, again, people can switch, right, based on environment and who they're with. And so to wrap up, though, those 3 ways that businesses can start really looking at inclusion and diversity, again, because they want to, not because they feel like they have to. What can they start doing?
Yes, absolutely, because they want to, not because they have to, because none of us are saviors. We're all here just working towards that world and that vision of what we want to create. So the number 1 thing you can do is start doing the inner work on yourself and really understanding all the parts that make up you and your own identity, really looking at your own heritage and culture and being super aware on how you're actually showing up. The next one is there's this beautiful scale of intersectionality, and I will share the link with that particular scale. But what it is on the top of this scale, it shows people who are privileged and people who are below this certain level are not as privileged. And there are things like colorism on there, sexism, genderism, European centrism, I think that's how it's said. There's all these different things on there, and it's really great to actually place yourself on each of these spectrums to see where you fit. Because what I have found with a lot of my clients is they see marginalized people fitting into this spectrum, but then they actually sit on the outside of it. They don't actually see themselves fitting into it. So when you can put yourself into those spectrums, you can understand where you are privileged, you can understand where you have power, where you have influence. And when you understand that, then you can make the most impactful actions in the places where you have the most privilege and most power. And so it's not about just going and talking about all the things. It's really important to understand us as a unique individual and a unique business and look at, okay, because of these things that make up us, where can we have the most impact? And then number 3 is looking at the culture of your business. And a lot of people really don't understand what I mean by that. They say, quite often they say, I'm so jealous. You have such a beautiful culture. I don't have culture. And that's just not true at all. Every person on the planet has culture. I mean, you eat certain foods, you talk a certain language, you celebrate in different ways, you sit at a table to eat, you live in different styles of homes. We have different types of social gatherings, and different ceremonies. So we all have culture. But if we start looking at our business and going, what's the culture of this business? Is this business one of those businesses that if you don't fit into the processes that we have, we can't help you? Or is it a culture that, okay, I have done everything via images in my businesses, but now I realize there are people with vision impairments. So how am I going to support them? Or providing different options. So really looking at the different ways your business is actually showing up and questioning, can I make this more accessible to people who are marginalised? And the only way you get to that point is by seeking those voices out and listening to those stories and listening to the challenges that they are having, and then taking what they have, sitting with it, and then looking at, okay, what can I actually change to make that more accessible for them, to make it better and less challenging or less of a obstacle for them to access me and my services, so I can do the thing I'm meant to do, which is help them.
And I know this conversation came up in one of my paid communities where it was around podcasts, for example, and they said, Ange, we noticed that you don't transcribe the podcasts at the moment. And I said, yes. And they said, and we were talking about those who are visually impaired, or no, those who are hearing impaired. Sorry,
Yes.
Hearing impaired. And my thing there is I can't change everything at once, right?
Yes.
It doesn't mean that I'm blinded by it. It doesn't mean that I'm not aware of it. It doesn't mean that we haven't talked about it in team meetings. But like I said to the crew, is like, there's only so much I can do to make change. That's an accumulation of change. And I've got to pick, right, where I focus on something and do it well, is my opinion, versus feeling I get it. Because if not, I feel like it, for me personally, then I'm just doing a tokenistic thing across the board, right? Like it's like I'm ticking all these boxes, but I'm not actually leveraging or making the change and impact that I want. So would it be fair to say, like, acknowledge, like, reflect on the three things that you just talked about and choose one thing that you're passionate about and know that you can really start to make an impact versus trying to do everything at once? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I would suggest do those things in order they gave them.
Yep, gotcha. Yep,
so
perfect.
Do the number one and then move on to the number two and then move on to the number three.
Okay.
And I think you bring up an amazing point. Don't do all the things because that is so overwhelming. If you have that intention, beautiful intention there, and you are taking little actions every day to get closer to that goal, that is better than what happened the day before. You were closer to that goal than before. And also you mentioned doing it, not wanting to do it wrong. I'm going to be really honest here. You're probably going to do it wrong. I do things wrong. And that is absolutely okay, because it's better to have the intention and want to do it and get it wrong than just turning away from it and putting it in the too hard basket. Because at the end of the day, this really is a new, I guess, field. We don't actually have a template. We're all trailblazers in this space now because what is inclusion? We're still discovering it, and it's such an evolving space. So something that seems okay now, in a couple of months' time, they might be like, no, that's actually not appropriate anymore. So it's a continuously evolving space, and this is why it's great to have a commitment to continuously learning about inclusion and diversity. But it's okay to get things wrong. And what I'd say to my clients is share what you're learning and share what you're going through, and be okay with saying, you know what, that thing I said last week, I've had additional learnings now, and I now know that's not appropriate, or that wasn't okay. This is what I should have said, and this is what I meant. And learn the process of apologizing. Because you are probably going to cause offense in some way. Marginalized people, Aboriginal people, we are individual people, and we have our own ideas and thoughts and concepts of the way we think things should go or solutions should be. We're not going to agree. So really understanding that we belong in a community, but we are individuals as well. So you're probably going to upset someone no matter what you do. And if you can really be okay with that, but when that offense or upset is brought forward to you, if you can really sit with it and be okay with the apologizing process, and not just to apologize, I mean really sit with it and go, yeah, I am very regretful that I have caused that offense, and then seeking out, how can I do this better?
Yep. And I think we all can always do things better, right? But again, apologizing is something that doesn't come easy, right? But it's something that I think is a skill that people need to be able to learn to listen, to learn to apologize, to forgive, and to continue to try harder. Now, for those businesses who are out there going, I'm probably going to need a little bit more help than just the 1 hour podcast with you and Louise. How can people connect with you to start looking at their own individual stuff, their own individual businesses, to ensure that inclusion and diversity are starting to make change and happen within their own space and family life? Where can they find you?
They can find me on louiseoreilly.com.au.
Fantastic. And again, you've got courses, you've got amazing content that's out there. You also share a lot of great stuff over on Instagram too. And my last question before we wrap up is, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started out in business?
Oh, what do I wish I knew? I think I wish I would have known that it didn't require so many hours. To be impactful and to make change and create amazing transformations in people doesn't require you to be chained to your computer and in your office. That a lot of the work and a lot of the most amazing ideas and processes and everything that happens in your business quite often happens when you're just having fun playing with your kids, or you're having a shower and it's so relaxing and you're self-indulging and loving yourself. So much of business happens when you're not in business. And if you really increase the quality of your life and the joy in your life, your business is going to thrive.
Dude, I love it. Joy, fun. A lot of people are forgetting about fun, right? It's just work. Now, listen, Louise, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. And I really hope that others have been able to have a few aha moments and realities about what they may be doing and never even thought they were doing. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. My team and I will also be putting together the show notes for this episode at angelahenderson.com.au. Thanks again, Louise. I appreciate it. And for the rest of you, have a fabulous day no matter where you are in the world. And I look forward to you joining me again next week for another awesome episode of the Business and Life Conversations podcast. Thanks again, Louise.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson. www.angelahenderson.com.au